review this book, Spartacus, by Aldo Schiavone, a historian from Italy. It's a very short book. You can read it in a couple of hours. In my opinion, it's the best book ever written about Spartacus. And I'll explain why. But first, who was Spartacus? Roman rebel, freedom fighter, symbol of masculinity, heroic gladiator. He is really whoever we want him to be. That is what he has become. Fact became history, history became legend, legend became myth. And it's hard today, looking back, to know exactly who was Spartacus. First of all, we don't know his name. We have no idea what his name was. Spartacus is a Latin name. That's what the Romans called him when he became a slave, when they made him fight as a gladiator, and they took his identity off him. The only writing that survives about this man Spartacus was written by the Romans. The Romans hated him. History is written by the winners. So who was Spartacus? Well, we do know some facts about him. Some of what the Romans wrote about him we know has to be true, because although they were bad-mouthing him constantly in their histories, they let some facts stay in there that actually show a good light on him, that if a more professional propagandist would have taken out. We know that he was an officer in the Roman army. Now you might find that strange, but the Roman army was it's an empire. There's no way that a few 100,000 Romans could run an empire that was the biggest in the world at that time. So they enlisted local people of the peoples who they conquered. Every time they conquered a country, they put those people in their army. And they always sent them to fight in another country, never against their own people, where they would be more loyal. So Spartacus came from what was then known as Thrace, a part of the world that today is composed of modern Greece and Bulgaria and a little bit of Turkey. So we know he was a Thracian. We know he was an officer in the Roman army. We know he was educated. And the mistake that the Romans made was they sent Spartacus and his Thracian Roman fellow army people to fight in Thrace against a rebellion. And he refused. He wouldn't fight against his own people. So the Romans stripped him of his rank, made him into a slave, and then, because he's highly trained and athletic, shipped him to Rome to fight as a gladiator. He went to what was then the greatest gladiatorial training school in the Roman Empire of Capua. Capua is a city 160 kilometers, 100 miles south of Rome. There is an amphitheater there today, built on the site of the amphitheater that Spartacus fought in. So you can go to Capua as a tourist. You can stand in the amphitheater. But yeah, this is where it happened. Spartacus didn't last long in the amphitheater. The gladiators, by and large, were thugs who could perhaps have the opportunity of becoming free if they killed enough people, became popular enough. Most of them died in the arena, and they were criminals, most of them. But you had a few people like Spartacus who were educated and had previous lives and were then thrown into slavery and into being the gladiators. Spartacus was highly intelligent. He knew that he wasn't going to live long as a gladiator, and he organized a rebellion. He escaped from the gladiatorial school, killing everybody in it, and he allied with a fellow gladiator from Gaul, which is today France, called Crassus. So you had the two of them together with joint leaders. You had Spartacus and Crassus. Today we only remember the name Spartacus. You'll see why that is. They escaped, they formed an army. The weapons that gladiators used in the ring were almost, I wouldn't call it ornamental fighting, but they were not military weapons. But the gladiators soon captured a convoy of military weapons and then became armed. Of course, Spartacus knew how to train gladiators and turn them into troops. So you had these highly trained, highly athletic killers who became almost instantly an army. And the problem with the Romans was they always underestimated the gladiators because they despised slaves, they despised rebels, they despised anybody who was not Roman. That was their second mistake. Italy, what is today Italy, was not a homogeneous Roman country. It wasn't that everybody in Italy was a Roman and spoke Latin. They weren't. The Romans had conquered the peoples of Italy, just like they conquered the other people around the Mediterranean. The Mediterranean Sea became known as the Roman Lake. All of these peoples who the Romans conquered had one thing in common. They hated Romans. They absolutely hated them. And Spartacus knew this. And he thought he could stir up the people of Italy, the non-Roman peoples, to unite and fight against the Romans and overthrow Rome. The Romans underestimated him because they saw him as a slave. They never saw him as a former fellow Roman officer, as highly trained as they are, as smart as they are, as educated as they are, as informed as they are. No, they saw him as scum, vermin. The same way as many people would view people who are in a high security prison. The guys who are just covered in muscles and tattoos and not very smart and living like savages, killing each other. That's how the Romans saw the slaves. They were never going to admit to themselves that slaves could form an army that could defeat a Roman army. So they didn't take it seriously at first, and that was their mistake. Spartacus outsmarted them, outfought them, and every time he met a Roman army, he defeated it, he and Crassus. So at this point, there were two co-leaders, both known equally, Crassus and Spartacus. Spartacus later became a famous guy. That's because as they went through the Roman countryside, the Roman Empire in Italy depended on slavery. I think like a quarter of the population was slaves. All the agricultural work was done by slaves. Slaves hated their masters. They could be tortured by their masters. The masters could just have sex with them when they wanted. They could execute them for no reason. They hated them. So these guys rose up, killed their masters, often slowly and painfully. It was payback time, and joined the army of Crassus and Spartacus. As the army got bigger and bigger, and the Romans still couldn't understand why is it a bunch of scum, in their eyes, low-life, stupid, ignorant peasants who they saw little better than animals could defeat their armies. They constantly underestimated the strength of these armies. After they'd lost a couple of legions, they realised the seriousness of the situation, and more slaves were rising up. So the economy is now getting wrecked. Nobody's bringing in the harvest. The slaves are all leaving, killing their masters, and running to Spartacus's army. So then two guys decided to end this. A general called Pompey and a billionaire called Crassus. The billionaire had no military experience. Pompey was a highly trained, experienced general. But the billionaire could raise a giant private army. Crassus and Pompey hated each other. Each wanted to be the hero. They wanted to be, I'm going to be the daddy. I'm going to defeat Spartacus, bring his head back on a plate, then I'll be the hero of the day. That rivalry didn't help either, which obviously Spartacus and Crassus understood. Crassus and Spartacus split the army in two, their army in two. Nobody knows why. Crassus was a less experienced, less gifted military commander, and he was defeated by the Romans. Spartacus moved north, and he found the body of Crassus, gave it a fantastic funeral, and at this point there's a turning point in the history of how Spartacus and his army saw themselves. They made 300 Roman soldiers fight to the death as gladiators. They reversed the position completely. They said, look, we are the masters now, you are the slaves. The only difference between a slave and master is power. It's nothing to do with you're superior, you're better educated, you're Roman civilization. If you're so clever, why are you fighting in the arena to the death for our entertainment? Now at this point, we only have the Roman account, the Romans writing after the event about this man Spartacus trying to explain everything. And one of them gives the game away. He says, there's a little detail in there, he says, Spartacus started refusing to accept deserters from the Roman army. Again, if you're in the Roman army, it's because somebody made you be in there. You didn't want to be in it. You had to serve for 20, 25 years. You would never see your home country, your family, for 20, 25 years. You have brutal punishments, constant warfare. So a lot of deserters left and fled to Spartacus's army. Why did Spartacus turn away the deserters at this point, when before had been accepting all slaves, all deserters, anybody who could pick up a weapon, he turned them into a fighting soldier? And at the same time, he was right on the northern river, the River Po of Italy. He could have marched out of Rome. There was nothing in front of him. There was no Roman army that could have stopped him. He could have escaped. He could have taken his army and left. If that's all he wanted, if he just wanted his freedom, he could have run away, gone for it, disappeared into northern Europe. He didn't. He turned and he marched on Rome. This is what the Roman historian said. He intended to destroy Rome, and he refused to accept deserters. Because at this point he sees himself as good as any Roman army. He sees himself as just a general, not as a warlord, but as a ruler. No longer a rebel or slave. Don't forget, the guy was from an educated Thracian family. He'd been an officer in the Roman army. And this was his mistake, because he saw himself in that light. That's what this book says. This is where this book is different from any other story of Spartacus. And it's well supported with evidence. It's really good analysis. And there are historians at the back of this book that are saying that this is the best history people have written. Very short history. And written in simple, basic English. You can read it in 2 hours. It's like reading a really good novel. It's not written in this clunky, archaic, horrible style of historians and academics. It's written like a journalist would write an article in a newspaper. So Spartacus's mistake was, he's marching on Rome. He knows that he cannot. There are rebellions taking place in the Roman Empire elsewhere, not just inside Italy. There were always rebellions taking place because everybody hated the Romans. So he thought the other guys in Italy, all the other different peoples, would rise up with him to get rid of the hated Romans. What he overlooked was they didn't see him as a Thracian nobleman, an educated Thracian. They didn't see him as a former Roman officer. They saw him as a slave. They despised slaves. Slaves, deserters, runaways, beggars. They were just scum. So they weren't going to join the army of scum. It's their self-esteem would not let them join in. So he overestimated his power. He thought everyone in Italy would rise up in one go, get rid of the Romans. That was his mistake. Now in the army of Pompey, we had a young officer called Julius Caesar. This is where he made his first career and fame and fortune, fighting with Crassus and Pompey against Spartacus. Spartacus finally was defeated. The Romans brought together their forces from across this giant empire and defeated his army. They did not, however, capture Spartacus. They didn't know what he looked like. Again, we don't know the guy's name. We don't know what he looked like. We know he was 36 years old. This was 71, Common Era, before the Common Era. That's all we know about the guy, really. And the surviving gladiators in his army, they were crucified, 6,000 of them, on the Appian Way. The Appian Way is a Roman road that leads out of Rome. You can stand there and see where these people were crucified, rows and rows and rows of them. Crucifixion was the punishment for rebelling against Rome. Spartacus was never captured. Some say he lived. He probably just died in the battle and nobody could identify his body. However, the legend lives on. The legend lives on. The man became myth. He became a symbol of everything that we would like in so many ways, such as freedom. Who he was, we don't really know. But this book probably is the closest we've got so far to knowing who Spartacus was. That's why it's the best book I've ever read about the guy. Thank you for watching.